Welcome to the Nuclear Power Institute's The Path of Most Persistent podcast. The podcast highlighting individual stories of persistence, community outreach, and inspiration to support the continuing and emerging nuclear science and technology needs across the state of Texas. Thank you for joining us today, and we hope you enjoy today's podcast. Howdy. Welcome to another episode of The Path of Most Persistence. Today we are joined by NPI Regional Coordinator as well as Stephenville High School physics teacher, Brian Salge. He is a generous and amazing partner of NPI, giving a lot of his time, efforts, and does really amazing work with our program. So we're very happy to have him today joining us in this podcast. So thanks for joining us, Brian. I don't know if you want to give a little bit about your background or anything additional that I didn't cover there.
Sure. So I went to Tarleton State University, where I pursued a Bachelor's of Science in Physics and graduated in 2010. I've been teaching ever since then. I taught at Keller High School for 3 years, teaching principles of technology and physics. I also helped out with their UIL science program there while I was there. And then I came to Stephenville and have been working as a high school physics teacher in Stephenville ever since. My other duties at the school include NHS sponsor, and I'm the WIT sponsor as well as the WIT Regional Coordinator. And then I have a lot of jobs. So in the summer, I work with Dr. Daniel Marble at Tarleton State University. I'm the camp director for the physics summer camp that we hold there every year. So
That's great. Thank you. So for those that don't know, that may be watching this, WIT is one of our NPI programs called Workforce Industry Training that Brian is one of our sponsors for, as well as a regional coordinator, but it's for high school students. And so that's kind of what WIT is. It's a high school program for juniors and seniors that he does there at Stephenville. So thank you for doing that and been an amazing sponsor for that program. Kind of going along that, what helped you decide to pursue a career in teaching?
So that's kind of a funny story. My mom was a high school teacher. She's retired now. My grandmother was a high school civics teacher for years, both at Mathis High School, where I went to school as well, down in South Texas. Because of me seeing them and how much that it honestly was a struggle in education at that time, especially I chose, or I said I would never be a teacher. Basically, there's no way I would ever teach. It's not going to happen. And I hear the story a lot from educators that said that they would never be a teacher, but now, it's what they love to do. So my 11th grade year, I took a physics class, which I fell in love with physics in that class, even though I didn't really know what it was at the time. But had a great teacher, a great mentor. He was frustrated because the administration kept getting onto them for their failing tax scores, back after the TOS test, the tax test. So he decided that he was going to start a program, a Saturday school program, and he was going to hire us, his AP Physics students, to tutor kids that had failed the tax test. So he recruited me to teach a tax science remediation course. And I thought I was going to tutor. I was excited to come in and tutor. I walk in on the first Saturday, and he says, "You're down in this room." I don't remember what room number it was, but I walk down there. I walk in, and there's 20 seniors. Remember, I'm a junior in high school. There's 20 seniors sitting there, and I'm looking around, wondering, I wonder who the teacher is. Can't wait to meet. I don't know if it was going to be Miss King or Coach Bartlett. Yeah, I didn't know who it was going to be, but turns out it was me. So for for the rest of that semester and up until the retest in the spring, I worked with those students, and I finally started to learn why people choose to go into education. Just being able to see them make connections that they never had before. I mean, we're seniors in high school, and the majority of that test is biology. So they had done that ages ago, and they never got it. They never understood it. And the kid told me, He says, nobody took the time to just explain to me this really simple thing that you explained to me. Thank you so much for teaching us. And needless to say, I've never looked back ever since my 11th grade year. So,
Okay, I have to follow up on that. Okay, so Brian, thank you so much for being with us today. And I love your shirt. I see you're representing your school and WIT. Love it.
yes, ma'am.
Okay, so I already had in my head all the questions I was going to ask you, but you just blew it out of the water, so thanks.
Okay.
Uh, so my question to you, this is really intriguing to me. I was just having a conversation with my son that was related to this topic. So how does a junior walk into a classroom of seniors that probably really don't, I'm assuming, care to be there? How is that you were able to actually teach something? I'm assuming there was a level of control as far as maintenance of the classroom. How were you able to do that, and how were you able to garner, trust, relationships, all the things that you now know? You can articulate what it takes to be a successful teacher, but how did you do it as a younger student in high school at that tender age? How are you able to do that, or how do you think you did it?
Well, I'll tell you, looking back, it's so funny. You walk in there, and again, I had no idea it was going to be that way. But the first Saturday was necessity. It was just like, I've been thrown into the situation, and I'm going to make the best of it, and then we'll see going from there, going forward. But looking back, I've been teaching. This is my 11th year teaching now, and have never met a more motivated set of kids. And I say kids, I mean they were older than me, but they were they were there. They were forced to be there, but they wanted to be done. They wanted to move on with their life. They wanted to pass that test, and all they needed was somebody to help them just a little bit. I didn't even do that much, honestly. I kind of guided them, just went over stuff, review. That's all we did, is review. And because they were so motivated, again, it was a really easy job, honestly. But when I compare it to what I do today, it's so far away from what I do today. And I mean, what I was doing back then was helpful enough, but I mean, it just blows my mind that they had teachers that just weren't doing what they needed. And it's kind of sad looking back at that. But
How difficult was it as a junior walking into a classroom full of seniors, um, and obviously knowing some of them and everything like that? Was it stressful or difficult? Like, you didn't have any previous experience teaching or anything. How, teaching your peers, how difficult was that for you?
so yeah, Mathis is a pretty small community. Everybody knows everybody else, and so it initially they're just kind of surprised to see me. Obviously, I'm surprised to see them as well, or just them. Not a teacher in there with us, but um, it, it was kind of one of those things. Again, it was necessity, right? It's that they need to pass. I'm here to help them pass, and so we're going to make it happen. So, but the age difference was problematic, but I mean, it was something that we had to overcome. And so, if it's I think the second time we met, we just talked through like how we can get from where we are now to where we want to be. We laid out a little roadmap. It's like we're doing these small things, small steps along the way, and again, that they were on board, and they bought in. They understood I was there to help them, and again, they let me help them.
So that kind of brings us into the topic for today. So thanks for that segue.
No problem.
So, the I guess the purpose of these podcasts is to talk about perseverance and persistence, and working through problems, and how did you get to the other side. So, um, saying you went step by step and worked through these. I don't want to call them issues or problems, but the challenges. Um, is that Did you carry that forward through college into your teaching now? Or how do you view perseverance and persistence now versus how did you whenever you were in high school?
So I would say something else that was happening that time in my life that kind of really helped me understand what perseverance and persistence was. Both my parents. So my junior year, my mom got very sick, let's just say, and then the same thing happened my senior year, and so there was a period of time where my brother's off at college. I'm the only one at home now, and my parents are not doing well. They're sick. I'm worried about them, and I had to do all the stuff around the house that needed to be done. Again, this is that same time period where I'm working with those kids. This is when that started. And um, everything that my parents had instilled in me since day one, all the stuff that I'd learned. I grew up on a farm and ranch in South Texas. And so we were always working together, but it was always together. And so I always had someone I could depend upon. I always had my mom, I always had my dad, my grandparents, my brother even. But, my brother's off at college. My granddad's older, mom and dad are ill. Uh, there's really nobody else to rely on. And so then I'm falling back on, again, those things they instilled in me. I'm falling back on my faith and I'm pressing on. And so anytime I run into issues now, first I can look back and say, you made it through that time that was really difficult. This time is not, or something that you can make it through as well. And then just falling back on, there's really no way but forward. Even then, there's no way but forward. And so we had to push through. I had to take care of my parents. I had to take care of those kids. I have to take care of my students today. There's not another option. So,
To, to take that a little bit further, Brian, what were some of those things that your parents taught you, your grandparents taught you? I know you mentioned very briefly faith, but were there any other techniques that you used? Were there any comments or quotes or things that they would say regular to you, or just simple acts that were common in your household that reassured you, that gave you a strength to hold on to during those times?
my dad and my mom would always say, if you start something, you have to finish it because that's just who we are. If you're not finishing what you're starting, then you're not growing into the man you need to be. And then my grandparents, especially my granddad, he's one of the smartest men I ever knew. He'd often just stop and say, "What are you doing?" And I'd say, "Here's what I'm doing. Here's what's going on." And he would just listen. He wouldn't say a word. And then he'd ask, "Well, why are you doing that?" And then I'd explain, "Well, here's why I'm doing that. Here's why it's so important." And he says, "Is it really that important?" And he had a way of refocusing me almost and making me think about, again, what are we doing and why are we doing it? And is it really important? Because if it's not, then we shouldn't be wasting our time. And if it is important, then it should be easy to see why it's important to work hard. If it's something that's worth doing, then it's worth doing well. And that played itself out a lot of different ways on the farm. Um, I'd get frustrated a lot of times just because it's like there's an easier way to do this. He's like, but it's not the best way. We're going to do it the best way, and it may be hard, it may be difficult, and it may take far longer than it could any other way, but we're going to do it the best way. I'd say those two things are things I could kind of lean back on really at any time. I could stop what I was doing and say, why am I doing this? Does it really matter? And if it doesn't, then stop doing it. And if it does matter, then try to find the best way to do it.
Nice, thank you.
That's pretty amazing. That's really amazing that you have such amazing role models too. In those, as Dr. Segovia mentioned, those formulative years, to lean back on. And you had mentioned previously also that you had some mentors in high school. Do you now find yourself in that role and giving that sort of advice that your grandpa gave you to your students, and how I guess important to you and uh, hopefully to them too are those types of words of encouragement and advice?
So when, I was, like you said, I was very blessed by my family. Um, but as far as school goes, I was never really looking for a mentor. They just kind of found me kind of where I was. And I mean, again, it's my junior year in high school. I had two fantastic teachers. I had a fantastic English 3 teacher and then an AP Physics teacher, um, Mrs. Hennig and Coach Bartlett. And again, they kind of just found me. I didn't find them. I wasn't seeking them, but they were able to help me and guide me and kind of into who I am today. So to your question, now I find myself in that role, but again, now I'm the one having to look for it, because the kids aren't really looking for a mentor. They're just trying to get through high school. They're trying to find their path, but now I can help them find their path, like those teachers were able to do for me. So it's really really important to me now. It wasn't so much back then because you don't know where you're going until somebody shows you the path, if that makes sense. So now I maybe a little um, high-handed of me to say, but I've really try and help people find the path that they want to take. Um, and it's really easy for me, especially with what WIT has afforded us and with what I teach. I feel like I teach something that's very applicable to the real world, and we can make connections. And WIT helps me do that even more to the real world. And I hope that I'm able to help students find their path.
So Brian, just to loop back a little bit. So Coach Bartlett and Ms. Hennig.
Yes, ma'am.
So have you ever had an opportunity since high school to go back and tell them how you've expressed your gratitude to them at all?
So I have with Mrs. Hennig because she retired in Mathis. She still lives there. I talk to her fairly regularly in or on Facebook. Just how's everything going? How are you doing? And she loves to hear you know what I'm doing or where I'm at, just from all her students because a lot of people loved her. And then Coach Bartlett started school in the United Arab Emirates, so I have not spoken with him. He's you know he moved from Mathis to San Antonio, big step up, and I'm like, oh man, I don't know how I'm gonna find him, but now he's in the UAE and I have no idea how to get a hold of him now. So
Well, you never know. The world is very small. But I ask you that only because I know you understand this as an educator. Some days are really rough. And the things that keep us going as educators, it's just those small kernels of you know what, you did something good today when a student comes back and just tells you a difference maybe you've made. So I know they keep you going, and I would assume because they certainly do for me.
oh, absolutely.
But I do want to ask you something, and this is a little bit of a swerve to what we're talking about. But um, as far as right now, I know there's a lot of questions into science, and I don't know if you've really felt that in the classroom from students that are questioning science or questioning facts or what's going on. Maybe it's with the pandemic, or maybe it's with weather, but how is that you're able to communicate effectively as an educator with your students, maintain your rapport with them, and let someone know that they're factually incorrect? And how do you do that? Again, maintaining that rapport with your students and also maintaining that level of confidence that is so required for teachers.
So it's come up every year since I started teaching. You'll have students that believe that sometimes you can't tell if they're joking, trying to get a rise out of you, or if they actually think what they're saying. They'll talk about the Earth being flat or the moon landing being faked, or I've had kids talk about chemtrails, all kinds of stuff, right? Especially now with us being asked to wear masks, it's how does this work, or this doesn't work. My dad says, my grandma says, etc. um, I find it's best to try to explain things. I mean, it's science, and so it should be logical. It should be something that we can talk through. So whenever we talk about reasoning and critical thinking, I always try and encourage them, when someone says something, whether it's me or, your pastor or your mom or whomever, ask the question again, how do we know that? And what evidence do we have to support that? And what I've found is, students say I'm doing research, and they really mean they're looking up something online. That's what you're Googling something, if you will. But I find it best to try and teach things in a way that's not like magical, if you will, especially with physics, because it can seem like there's no way that we could be able to explain this phenomenon. There's no way that it's possible to explain it. But I think it's Richard Feynman that said something to the effect of, you have to teach children logically as opposed to acting as if it's magical, because science will never make sense if it seems like magic. If it seems like it's impossible to learn, then the children won't be able to learn. So I think a lot of times logic and reason and talking through why we do what we do, that's something I feel like is missing a lot. And I might be rambling, sorry if I am, but it's easy to say, do this, without explaining how something works. I say, do it this way, and say, okay, I'll do it that way. Like, I feel like, as far as my education, like, I think back to, like, math in the 6th grade, and I'm like, it's like, do it this way. It's like, well, there's another way to do it. No, do it this way. It's like, okay, I'll do it that way. Yes, ma'am. But why are we doing it this way? Don't ask questions. And I think we lose kind of that curious nature. I think, like, I look at my kids. I have 2 beautiful kids, and they're so curious about the world around them, and I don't want them to ever lose that. I want them to always be curious, because if they are curious, then they won't just take something at face value. They'll ask questions about it, and those questions lead them to a much deeper understanding than just taking somebody's word for it.
Thank you. That was great.
So, kind of looping back around, I know we've kind of been hitting different points and everything, but looping back, what are some of the most important lessons about perseverance that you've you know acquired through your years of experience as an educator, and now as a father, especially?
So, I mentioned earlier that my mom was sick when I was in high school, and she's pretty ill. She's better now, and we're so thankful for that. But there was a time where, because she's so ill, she is worried and scared all the time, is upset all the time. And my parents love, old westerns, John Wayne, that kind of stuff, Fistful of Dollars, etc. And my dad bought my mom this plaque. It's a John Wayne quote that's like, "Courage is when you're scared to death, but you saddle up anyway." I think perseverance is kind of that same way. It's when you look at a problem and you feel like there's no way this is solvable, or it seems impossible, or I don't know how to get from step 1 to step 50. It's taking that first step is really the most important thing you can do, because once you take that first step, then the second one's a little bit easier. You're a little bit closer to your goal. But as an educator, it's easy to see this play out every year. Kids come in day one, and they're new, they don't know anything, and they've heard my class is hard, and they're scared, they're worried. And what's awesome is that I can see where they're going to be already. Like, I can see to where they're going to get from day one. They can't see it. There's no earthly way they can see that they'll ever be able to do anything that I ask them to do, but I know they can. And so that's the reason that I push them, and that I want them to be better. But again, being able to explain to them that they're at step 1 and going towards step 50 is really hard to do. I will say, though, it's important. We just went through 6 weeks, so it's important whenever you have little milestones where I don't feel like I've really done anything, I haven't really accomplished anything, to really stop and take stock. What are you doing? Why are you doing it? But then also, how far have you come? That's another important thing that I picked up along the way. It's looking back and seeing where you really started and where you are now, because it's easy to say I haven't learned anything, or I haven't done anything, and to really value the steps that you've already made.
Yeah, I think that's a powerful message especially for students. And kind of follow-up question: what maybe are some of the most important um, lessons or pieces of advice for maybe educators who are new to their position or being an educator, um, especially in terms of going and seeking out those students that may need help, that don't know that they need it, or maybe those teachers that never had that spark like you obviously do on finding out and actively seeking out students to help.
Well, I'd say that the most important thing is to realize how incredibly important your job is. And it's not really a job, it's kind of one of those things that's, people joke around, it's a calling or whatever, but it really feels that way sometimes. It feels like this is a job that you should do if you're called to do it. If it's for you, then you can tell the difference really quickly in someone who's there to collect a check and somebody who really loves what they do. So first of all, make sure you love what you do. And if you don't, then go find what you love and can make a living doing and do that. But if you're here and you're in it for the long haul, being able to persevere obviously is something that's learned, but it's learned through going through difficulty and walking through that difficulty. Surround yourself with people who are positive, who are helpful, and who are like minded. People who love their students, who are there for their students. If you surround yourself with those people, then your job will be relatively easy because when you have a rough day, they'll be there to kind of pick you up. Whereas if you don't have that support system, and the nice thing is that support system can be found even online now. Say you have nobody at your school, there are people around the world who are educating students who care about their job, who are doing a great job, doing great things. Find those people, seek them out. Stay away from negativity, stay away from people that are mad or hate their job or upset. Um, and then realize again, take stock and realize why you're there. If you have a rough day, realize why you're there and what you're there to do. Because at the end of the day, it's not just I'm taking some knowledge that I have and I'm just disseminating it to students. That's not really what it is. It's preparing somebody for the next step of their life. If you're teaching something that's worth teaching, then it's also worth knowing. And if it's worth teaching and worth knowing, then it shouldn't be hard for you to make it something that students want to be there to learn.
That's awesome. I just want to put that on a postcard and just like tack it onto my wall. Thank you so much for all of your thoughts and your really your wisdom today. Does anybody else have any questions?
I have one more. Oh, Gianna? Okay. So, Brian, I don't know if you recall a comment, a statement I made to you. I don't know if it was maybe at the end of the first year that we started working together after I met you, or maybe it was the second. But it was after a meeting. You had hosted a meeting, and we were walking out to the car, and I was talking to you, and I was asking you what your plans were for your future, and I said something like to you, "I don't know what's going to happen, Brian. I don't know what's coming, but I've got plans for you, buddy." And if there's ever a way I can fit you into something, I'm going to. And uh, anyway, I'm sure I said some other things, but I want to know, first of all, do you remember that
Yes, ma'am.
comment?
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am. Absolutely.
What do you think? I don't know if I said something differently or you recall it differently, but what do you think I saw in you? Why would I make that comment to you?
That's a good question. I could ask you that question right now, but I'll try and answer it.
And let's not be modest. How about that? Let's try really hard.
Well, I'm not. That's the one thing I'm not very good at. Again, that's also not how I was raised. Being humble is important. So I hope that you saw somebody that was just willing to do what needed to be done, and saw somebody that cared about their job and that cared about their students and would be able to help more people. I hope that's what you saw.
Well, do you want to know what I saw?
Sure.
No, absolutely. I mean, it is clear. And that's one of the reasons it was so very important for us to have you on to interview you today, Brian, because you have consistently and constantly, since our first introduction, presented yourself in such professional manner, not only professional, but a caring, concern, just a genuine person. And I think for someone that has been in the business twice as long or longer than you, almost 3 times perhaps at this point, you see, you really start spotting people of quality and of value. And it's easy to see from you. You have an effect on those around you. And I think that goes to the quality of person you are. Again, your genuineness, your intensity, although it's quiet and gentle, your intensity and your sincerity in what you do. And I've always appreciated that about you. And I know you're a man of your word, that when you have told me you're going to do something, I don't ever have to question you. You just do it. And because even if we need to go back and forth on how you do it, which I can't ever think of a time, but you've always been one that if you say something's going to happen, and it happens, and it's always at such a high level. So I want to thank you, because I don't know that I've ever had an opportunity to thank you for saying yes to all of my questions upon you or opportunities. But it's always been very important for me to give you more space, because you have such a great effect on people around you, and especially students. I've seen you in the classroom. I've seen you at your SOS events, and it's really something special. And most importantly to me is the way I've seen you engage with your own children and your wife. That says everything about a person. So it's very, for an older person to see someone at your age to carry everything that you do with such meaning and respect, means more to me than you really know. And so because you demonstrate all those qualities and traits, I think more students need to have you as a role model. So again, thank you for saying yes, and hopefully you'll continue to say yes as more opportunities arise, because you're amazing and more students need to know you.
Well, thank you.
Well, I second that. I'm so happy to have you on the team and contributing to everything that NPI is putting in place, especially in the high school. So thank you from our part too. And for joining us today. So
Yes.
really appreciate your time and efforts and your thoughts today. And can't wait to work more with you. Thank you for listening to our podcast. The Nuclear Power Institute is a joint center with Texas A&M University and the Texas A&M Engineering Experiment Station, and is a component of the Nuclear Engineering and Science Center. For more information about our center or about our guest speaker today, please visit our website at npi.tamu.edu and look for us on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Thank you.